Hey everyone, just giving you a little update on this landscape painting that I'm working on. So I think I've had about three or four settings with this, and I'm reasonably happy with how it's going. I'll just discuss some of the things that I'm thinking about while I'm doing this, especially at this point, since this is getting fairly developed. Things are becoming more clear. I just want to touch on some of the things that I've been really trying to get, especially in the last couple sessions, because as you've been able to sort of view this from the beginning, you can see that it always begins in the state of, especially a scene like this, of absolute chaos. There's so much going on. And over time, obviously, it's getting a little more clear. Some of the colors are getting a little bit closer. At least to what my goal is, not necessarily what the sort of the photo itself shows, because I'm always trying to push color at least a little bit. And so in a scene like this, when you're doing a landscape painting, I've touched on this before when I mentioned in the previous video the idea of texture density. Texture density is essentially like how much are we actually going to have visible here? Because obviously in a scene like this, if I was a hyper realist painter, I could spend the next 5 months to even a year rendering every single little leaf, branch, everything, the light and dark, both sides of that, of every branch of every tree, leaf, spruce bough, and anything, all of that stuff I'd want to get in its entirety. I'm not trying to get an absolute level of realism in the detailing of this. I want to get a sense of it, but I have no desire to have it represent every single thing in its perfect detail. I say this all the time, but I am not a printer, I am a painter, and I really, as soon as I get too tight in certain areas, too tight meaning very detailed, very, accurate, everything's modeled perfectly so that it can be interpreted almost like a photo. I tense up and I feel like I've taken it too far. So part of, especially to distinguish ourselves from photographers, part of what I think the role of a painter is to obviously interpret this and translate it into your painting, dare I say the word style, or just your what you're trying to express through this. And part of what I'm really enjoying about this is that I've actually been using a very different color palette with this one. Actually, my last painting that was a night scene also used a very different color palette. So these last two paintings together have really been able to push me outside of my regular color palette. With this one in particular, some things that I'm doing a little bit differently is, well, first of all, I started with a very orangey undercoat. I think it might have been even cadmium orange, which is a very intense orange, or at least in part that mixed with something else. So I had this beautiful bright underpainting, and this is a very intentional part of this, is that you can still see a lot of that underpainting visible in this. It hasn't been entirely removed, and in fact it won't be. Even in parts of this blue down here, you can see little specks of that original orange yellowy kind of warm tone. And one of the things I like about having a nice, strong, vibrant underpainting is that these little bits that show through even to the final layer, they help to push the painting in one direction or the other in terms of the cooler, warm, or the mood or the atmosphere of it. In this case, it will warm, obviously being very, very warm, vibrant colors, it will warm up the whole scene. Even the cooler areas will feel more harmonic to the warmer areas because there'll be that little warm piece showing through into the final. Let's see, what else? One of the things I've also been doing this time, more than a lot of recent paintings, is I've been working with, I've been using a lot more layers of transparency and building them up gradually, which is interesting because typically the Impressionists worked quite thickly. They would just put the paint on so thickly, especially, for example, the group of seven. Many of you might have seen even the smaller, the sketches of the group of seven, but even the finals, they just used tons of paint. And part of that was because they were often doing those sketches at least en plein air, so outside on location, whereas then they would take that back to their studio. But even in their final paintings, they applied paint very thickly. I have very few instances here where I have very thick paint. It's hard to see this, but from my angle, I can see there is some paint that is a little more sculptural in quality, aka it sticks out from the board a little bit. It's easiest to see this from the side, obviously, but most of it is these layers of transparency. There's so many layers of transparency back here, and that makes sense because this is also the most layered area of the painting itself. There's so many dense layers of brush and trees and rocks and the pathway that that transparency it's nice because when you have transparent layers, you can build up a lot of texture gradually. So it's not, not everything is opaque. In fact, what I've been trying to consciously do here is have the foreground be a little bit more opaque than the background. And the darkest darks, which is, you can see it in the most recent round of this painting, that's where I applied these dark darks. But I got a beautiful, where is it? Here it is, Gamblin asphaltum. It's like asphalt. Asphaltum. It's a beautiful, I love this paint. It's very similar to transparent red oxide, which is another paint that I really love from Old Holland. The transparent red oxide I often use as an underpainting, and many people seem to do this. And it has this beautiful red richness to it. But the asphaltum does, but it has a little bit of coolness as well. And it's a little bit more matte, it seems. Some paint is more matte, some is a little glossier. It often depends on the binder in it. So I've got these kind of high-keyed, not high-keyed in terms of light, but these really intense darks in this. And it's a very reddy dark, it's a very warm dark. And so it has this real, the shadows are very impassioned in this one. They're very strong. They're not just a subdued kind of cool shadow that is, I find, tends to be a little bit more neutral. These shadows are very warm and vibrant. So I talked a little bit about this in a previous video where you can control both the light and dark as well as the saturation. So the actual intensity of color and the dullness of color. So sometimes you end up with a very dark shadow, but the color vibrancy is very low. So I find that makes it a little bit more neutral. Whereas when the vibrancy is very high and the darkness is quite high, then you get these beautiful, rich shadows that work in some cases. Again, because this is so warm, there's almost a big diagonal dividing line between the cool side that was mostly shadowed and then the warm side, although it's not so cut and dry because there was obviously light coming through on this side as well. But the warm side, I thought it was appropriate to have these intense, rich, reddy kind of shadows to echo the warmth around it. One of the things another thing I'm really enjoying in this is I love neutrals, mostly when you have a lot of color vibrancy already. If you have color vibrancy everywhere applied almost equally, it has this kind of like overwhelming effect that I don't love, and this is a lot of paintings I find today where there's just like maximum color vibrancy all the time and it's like too much. It overloads your senses. I'm loving working with the grays and browns in this. These kind of muddy, sort of neutral colors. In certain areas, even some of the highlights back here are actually quite neutral, even though they're a little bit more opaque. So the opaqueness makes it come forward, but the neutralness gives it this like dampening feeling to it. So yeah, same with the last painting. With the night scene, there were lots of dull, muddy, gray colors that, on their own are maybe not so desirable, but mixed with vibrant colors, it gives you this wonderful range. So I guess what I'm trying to do in this is have both a range of light and darks and a range of saturation. Obviously there's a range of hue as well. The hues are all over the place, especially in this area. There's just so many colors, and every time I look at my reference image, I see more and more colors back in here. But I am trying to add a little bit more actual color intensity in this area. I also, with some of the greens were really cool, and to warm them up a lot, I love this paint. I'm not sure where it is right now. Oh, here it is. This is an Old Holland paint, and it's called Golden Green or green gold. Gamblin has this paint too. I think many paint companies actually have green gold. The nice thing about it, as you can see from this little paint, I don't know if you can see that, but there's always a little representation of the paint color at the top. It's very transparent. So some paints are more transparent, some are more opaque. Often whites are quite opaque, but this is a very transparent one. And so I can use this straight from the tube, and it has a wonderful effect on top of other more opaque greens to add this beautiful warmth to it. So if you want to add, so to these spruce boughs here, I've been adding this like shadow underneath this sort of more vibrant green, and it darkens it a little bit, but then it adds this wonderful vibrancy. It does both. It's interesting. So there's a lot of, and I'll just touch on another one of my favorite colors. I don't know why, there's a lot of Old Holland ones today. I generally tend to use Gamblin, Old Holland, and Michael Harding, and Vasari, kind of the depending on who you ask, some of the top paint makers. I love a good paint. But this, it's called Green Lake, Yellow Green Lake, Indian Yellow Green Lake Extra. That's a big name. This is another one very similar to Green Gold, but it's a little bit, it's maybe a little bit more pungent, but it also really warms up colors. You can even apply this to like a blue, and it will just warm it right up, or add like, it makes it more vibrant. It's hard to describe, but some of my paints I use in a very, very particular way. And I've been loving the transparency in particular in this one. One of my nice dulling paints that I've been using a lot to help give me both a bit of, again, the dullness of the color, so desaturating that color, as well as more opaqueness, is this Michael Harding unbleached titanium dioxide. I love unbleached titanium. Gamblin also has one of these. This is a wonderful, as you can see, it's kind of a brown. It's a very light, unsaturated brown, more gray, I guess. But it's wonderful to give you this nice opaqueness. A lot of these highlights back in here are using that color mixed with a few others, and it gives you this nice little strong hit and this little highlight. But it still is kind of a mid-tone, which is really nice. So it's this very bold mid-tone that kind of jumps forward. Anyway, you might be able to see this if I zoom in a little bit more, but a lot of the brush strokes in here are still very, very apparent. You can still see the brush strokes very strongly. So that's exactly what I'm hoping to achieve with it. I never want to get to the point of going past the point where you can't really see those individual brush strokes being applied. That's really important to me, because I think that's the artist's, we all have different brush strokes. We all have different ways of moving our hand when we're painting. So that brush stroke in a way is kind of like a signature. I think it's important to kind of help establish, my painting versus someone else's is how I apply brush strokes. That's one of many ways to kind of distinguish yourself, but nonetheless, I like how this is going overall. So I'm going to keep at it today and see where I end up. All right, take care.